All right. So it is 2:01. We are recording and we are live and connected to our Facebook page. And so welcome everyone that is joining. We will be getting started in just a moment. So if you're just joining us and you haven't already, you can go ahead and put in the chat box your name. If you're with an organization, definitely connect with those of us who are here. If you're watching us on Facebook, then you can put that information into the comment section. And so, yes, and those of you watching on Facebook, feel free to press that share button and share it to your pages and groups so we can have the best robust conversation as possible. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So I hope everybody's Saturday afternoon has been going well, your Saturday and your weekend. All right, I see that all of our panelists are here. I'm excited to hear from you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, well, I have 203, and as people join, we will get them acquainted, but I'll go ahead and get started with little introductions and things of that nature and kind of just let you all know what is going to take place this afternoon. And so, hi, everybody. I know I've been saying, if you've been here early, you've heard me welcome you quite a few times, but I would like to officially welcome everybody to this afternoon, Our Voice, Our Power, Mobilizing Your Community for Action. And so my name is Ebony Hooper Boating, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the St. Louis ReCAST grant. And so ReCAST, it stands for Resiliency in Communities After Stress and Trauma. And it was a 5-year initiative that was awarded to St. Louis County in 2016. And it is all about participatory budgeting. And so if you were with us last week, then you got to join us for a conversation all about understanding what participatory budgeting is and how we can use it as a method to really empower our communities as residents. And so for those of you who weren't here, a quick snippet, participatory budgeting, or PB, is a model that ReCAST used to award funds into the community. And so it's a democratic process in which residents come together to help decide how public funds are spent within their community. And so for ReCAST, that looks like residents coming together to design community projects as it relates to our funding area, which is violence prevention, youth engagement, peer support, mental health, and trauma-informed care. And then residents also play a role in reviewing any proposals that come in from organizations on how they would implement their ideas. And then lastly, the community votes on what projects ultimately receive funding to be implemented in their communities. So that's participatory budgeting. Joining us this afternoon, along with myself, is my wonderful colleague and our program manager, Miss Paula Sutherland. She has those I voted buttons in the background, and I'm working like Miss Paula to have my flight attendant smile while speaking. And so if you were with us last week, I was on the panel. This week, I'll be acting as the moderator, and Miss Paula will be the one that will be engaging with you all in the chat box. So if you have any questions or anything like that, you can shoot them to Miss Paula. Also, those on Facebook, she is watching the comment section there as well. And so also, I want to acknowledge our core advisory board members that are here on the call. I see you. And I also see our community guiding board members who are residents throughout St. Louis City and St. Louis County, North St. Louis City and North St. Louis County, who actually played a pivotal role in designing out this month's webinar series and this afternoon in particular. So welcome, welcome, welcome everybody. And so a little bit about what's going to happen this afternoon. And so last week we kicked off things talking about, participatory budgeting and really understanding our role and our individual voices in our community and how important that is, civic engagement, and really thinking about things from, shifting how organizations and things really partner and work with us in our communities. But we were really focused more so on ourselves as individuals last week, because, we got to start with ourselves. But today we are going to be talking about more in-depthly about the power of collective voice. So what happens when we as individuals come together as a community to really advocate for things in our community as a unit, and how powerful collective voice is, and how you as residents can go about mobilizing your community action steps towards things that you may be passionate about, being a change agent for where you live. And so joining us this afternoon, we have several panelists. They are going to be talking about work that they have done either with their organization or as a resident themselves on how they have successfully mobilized around given topics to really activate the communities that they live in and that they serve, and also give you tips on how you can go about doing those things as well. And so we have with us represented, they'll introduce themselves a little bit more in depth as they present, but we will hear from Jessica Myers from the St. Louis Area Violence Prevention Commission, and she'll be talking about, efforts that are going on in our region around police legitimacy and reform. And then we also will hear from WePower, and we have Charlene Mack from WePower, as well as some community members that have really already been very instrumental in the work that they've been doing around early childhood education. And then, when the community speaks, we listen. And so our community guiding board said, along with those two topics, another thing that they really felt it was important for you all to hear about and that they wanted to learn about was community mobilization around partnering with our faith-based organizations to really make change in the communities that they are located in. And so we will wrap things up with hearing from Ms. Lisa Potts about partnering with faith-based organizations. So I know that got y'all excited. And so over the course of the time, I, as the moderator, will ask questions. And then at the end, we will also open it up from questions from the audience to ask any of the panelists. So feel free to save it for the end or to shoot those questions to Ms. Paula as you are watching. And so with no further ado, I am going to shift things to first we will hear from Jessica Myers from the St. Louis Area Violence Prevention Commission. And so she will tell you all about the VPC and the work that they are doing. And so I am going to spotlight her so you all can see her instead of me right now. And Jessica, handing it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ebony, and thank you, Paula, and everyone who was involved in organizing this. So as Ebony mentioned, I am project director for the St. Louis Area Violence Prevention Commission. Prior to this, I worked for 14 years doing direct service with victims of violence. For about the last 10 years of that, I worked predominantly with homicide victims, families, and friends. So a lot of experience doing that direct work. But when the opportunity to shift came to work more in the prevention sphere, that's when I moved over to the Violence Prevention Commission in 2018. So one of the things we always like to start with whenever we're talking about violence prevention is this quote from the Prevention Institute. The determinants of violence are multiple, complex, and often interrelated. A successful strategy must include the participation of a broad group of individuals and a range of activities that link with, build upon, and add value to each other. There's no single program, there's no single agency, there's no single person, there's no single police department that is going to get us out of our violence prevention problem. we need to have a broad coalition of agencies, but also of individuals, and individuals that represent the communities that are hardest hit by violence. So this is just one little example I like to give of some of our VPC community. This was for Wear Orange Day last June. Orange is the color for gun violence prevention. And so we took a picture of some of our members wearing their orange last June. And so we really have built what we like to call a coalition of the willing. And we use the public health approach. So I don't want to get too deep into the public health approach, but really this is about determining what the problem is. Who does violence happen to? Where does it happen? And how does it happen? And then we talk about risk and protective factors. We know what makes you less likely to get the seasonal flu, like getting a flu shot. We also know what makes you more and less likely to be a victim or a perpetrator of violence. So this is really about identifying those risk and protective factors and trying to implement prevention strategies, and then assuring widespread adoption. We don't want to keep the secret to ourselves. We want to share what works in communities so that other communities can mobilize around those findings. And so we are an agency, we have more than 60 member agencies. ReCAST is one of our members. We have more than twice that number in agencies that participate on a regular basis. So we have 120 to 150 agencies that participate on a regular basis in the Violence Prevention Commission. Lisa, who will be speaking later, is also one of our team members at the Violence Prevention Commission. She is being loaned to us by St. Louis MHB, so we love having Lisa there as well. And so our objectives are really around how do we respond to non-fatal shootings? For every one homicide you hear that makes the news, there's 20 to 30 non-fatal shootings, which means we have 20 to 30 opportunities as a community to interrupt that cycle of violence before it becomes fatal violence. So how do we build that response? And that's something that we've been working on. For those of you who don't know, if you know someone who's been a victim of gun violence, they can now dial 211, press 2, and then not only get access to all the services already offered by the United Way, but they'll also get a special intake that will be sent directly to victim services for follow-up. The second is about trauma-informed systems and programs and evidence-based programs. You may have heard about Cure Violence. We staff the Cure Violence Steering Committee that is all about bringing community voice into the implementation of that program in St. Louis in the 3 sites. And the last is about community attitudes about police legitimacy. And this is where we've done a lot of our community engagement and our community mobilization over the last year. For those of you who may not be familiar with the concept of police legitimacy is the belief that police want to do their job, want to serve the community, and want to form those relationships. And so our community engagement, this is one picture from some canvassing that we did around 211 and around the services of the Violence Prevention Commission. But before we started our police legitimacy strategy, we really wanted to know what are the things that community most wants from law enforcement. Our role is to amplify the voice of community in spaces where it's not traditionally heard. So I know when I took this on as a white woman running a violence prevention program in St. Louis, which experiences high rates of violence, but also high rates of very racialized violence and the experience of violence predominantly affecting communities of color, I knew that my role was to amplify the voices of community, not to bring my voice in to the work, but really to engage with community residents and help build the strengths to organize around policing or violence prevention. So specifically for policing, we held listening sessions on community policing. We did interviews with police officers. You know, we wanted to be able to say, this is what we hear from community, and this is what we hear from police. And this is the common ground that we don't always hear when we're talking about the relationship between police and community. And then we did an online survey. We know not everyone is comfortable coming into spaces to have in-person discussions, especially if they may have had a trauma history with policing. So we wanted to have multiple ways for community to engage. And we really wanted to talk about what's working in policing, what's not working in policing, and what parts of community policing would you like to see more of? How do we build that relationship between police and community? And thanks to our policy and systems change co-chair, He said, if you're asking these questions of community, you should ask them of police too. So we did. And we also asked, what support or information do you need from VPC to help you make the case for more community policing in your department? And then we had an online survey. Basically, the way it was rated, you got 24 statements about policing. And it was from 1 strongly disagree to 5 strongly agree. So the higher the average, the better your ratings of police legitimacy. And so it was some questions like, do police give you a chance to explain your side of a story? Do police make choices on facts, not bias or prejudice? And so what we found was the biggest concerns were about equity, enforcing the laws the same way for all people, and accountability, admitting when they get something wrong. This is not necessarily surprising, but part of the public health approach is wanting to build that knowledge base and build that definition of the crime or of the problem. And importantly, we don't want to just focus on the negative, right? And so the highest rated statements are about people being willing to call the police if they've been a victim or to provide tips. And so this really showed us, and it allowed us to make the case that even though the general public had concerns about policing and about the equity of policing and the accountability of policing, they were still willing to engage. They were still willing to trust the process to report crimes to police. And so this gives a starting off point where we can then say, there's this common ground, how do we then move forward? And what we heard both from the police and from community was some themes. The first was human resources. How do we recruit, retain, and promote officers who represent the communities they serve and want to form that relationship? Transparency. How does the police department share information with the community, and how are they held accountable, especially in cases of misconduct, especially in cases where someone is hurt or someone is killed? Community engagement practices. What community engagement practices are meaningful from community? You know, if you go to any police department and say, do you do community engagement? They'll say yes. The question then is, what is it that you do to engage community? And that can vary a lot, and not all of them are meaningful. So we heard both from police and from residents that the kind of highly scripted events like coffee with a cop, where you go and you have coffee with an officer, those aren't necessarily as meaningful, because the people that will come to those are people that already have a positive view of police in general. And so how do we engage community residents that may not have that positive view and that are also most likely to be the victims of violence? And then alternatives to police contact. We're really good at teaching people to call 911. We're not so good at then on the back end designing who responds to what. It's become kind of a police, fire, EMS response to everything, but people call 911 for things like mental health emergencies. And so we've worked with the city on their 911 diversion program that will send unarmed clinicians to mental health crises rather than an armed police response. So these are all things we heard from community and from police. And so in our statement on policing and violence prevention, our #1 recommendation is that we need to infuse community voice in a collective bargaining agreement. So we came up with these recommendations and we figured out a lot of what we're recommending is tied up in the police union contract or the collective bargaining agreement. And there is currently no way for community to have a voice in that. And so this is what we focused on as one of our engagement strategies. And so just the quick CBA 101, a collective bargaining agreement is the police union contract, lays out how they do their jobs. It's negotiated by the police department, the public safety director, the city of St. Louis or St. Louis County, and the St. Louis Police Officers Association, not the Ethical Society of Police. Just so you know, there's only one union that can bargain in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, and that's the Police Officers Association. And it covers everything from how much money officers make, to what happens when they do something wrong, to when an officer can get mental health testing. And so we did an educational campaign because the city did not seem inclined at the time to do community engagement around this collective bargaining agreement. So we did it. we talked with community and we talked about the CBA matters because it affects the wellness of the officers. It affects what information the community can have, and demands from activist groups and citizens, like a use of force database for officers who've been fired for use of force. That's also tied up in that collective bargaining agreement. So what we were hearing from community and what we were hearing from police were really tied up in this collective bargaining agreement. And so we did more community engagement, right? You can never have too much community engagement. And so we had a town hall and we did another survey, and we came out of that with our public input report for the collective bargaining agreement. And again, our first recommendation was there needs to be community input into this collective bargaining agreement, whether it's having pieces of it. You put the discipline policy out there and then you have public input, whether it's having facilitated discussions, whatever it is, there needs to be that community engagement. Community needs to understand the rules of policing and they need to be able to have input on there. And so a win for community mobilization in St. Louis County is that they actually had a public input session for the first time for their Sergeant CBA in response to calls from the Violence Prevention Commission and Forward Through Ferguson and groups like that. They actually had their first session ever in 50 years, which is amazing. It could have been better and we would like to work on how it could be done better. But that was absolutely a win for community mobilization. And they had a few hours worth of comments on that. The city, not so much. They have been negotiating. And just as of last week, this tweet from the Ethical Society came out. The police officers' collective bargaining agreement has been removed. The city determined that the police union was not bargaining in good faith, and they determined they're at an impasse. And they have said that the old collective bargaining agreement is null and void, and they need to start from scratch negotiating a new one. So we did an interview with the Post about this, and we said, guess what? This is a great opportunity for more community engagement, right? It always comes back to that community engagement. If you want to build relationships, you need to have the community at every table, whether it's the Violence Prevention Commission table, the police union CBA table. You need to have community engaged if you want to build relationships. And so that is my time. I am happy to take questions now or at the end. I know I threw a lot of information at you, but more information definitely is to come on the CBA and the future of what VPC is going to be doing.
Thank you, Jessica. That was really informative and let us know a lot of information. And so I do have a question for you. I know that, in doing this work and working with the community and also, working alongside the systems that you are, working so hard to transform, I imagine that there's definitely been barriers and challenges along the way. And so a question that I have for you are what are some of the barriers that the VPC has faced specifically around addressing police legitimacy in the St. Louis region?
I think anytime you're going to be doing systems change work, whether you're changing the medical system, the philanthropic system, the criminal justice system, the criminal legal system, any systems don't self-correct. You need pressure from outside a system to be able to change it. It works best if it's also paired with pressure from inside the system, right? So you get that inside and outside that are forming, that are working together to pressure that system to change. And so building a coalition of people that really understand the need for systems change, understand the current landscape, why the collective bargaining agreement is important, why we're talking so much about policing. Even though we can't police our way out of violence, we know that policing is an important piece. Building that committee and bringing those voices where they're not traditionally heard. We heard from communities that policing feels like a black box. They don't know what decisions are made, why officers are transferred out of neighborhoods, why patrol decisions are made. So it's important to bring that community voice to be that outside pressure to change systems that otherwise are pretty much okay with just coming along with the way that they've always done things.
Mm, thank you for that. And so, if there's anybody watching, now or watching the replay or anything like that, I know we'll be sure to share, the contact information and things. But for those that may be wondering, like, wow, that I need to be a part of that. What does that kind of look like as a resident participating with the VPC? How does that actually work if that someone does want to get involved?
Yeah, so our meetings are all open. Our committees are all open. We have 8 committees. So we pretty much have something that anyone will be interested in, whether you want to look at youth violence or you want to look at systems change or you want to look at community engagement. We have an entire committee dedicated to community engagement. So if you go to stlareavpc.org, we have a Get Involved tab. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can learn about our committees. And then our next full quarterly meeting is next Friday. So anyone who would like to email me, Jessica at stlareavpc.org. I am happy to share the information and you can join our quarterly meeting, learn more about what we're doing, and get involved however you feel most able to give your time and your talent to the work of violence prevention.
Wow, thank you, Jessica. Thank you for that. And so, you guys, even if you don't have questions right now, we definitely are going to open it up at the end. So, Jessica will still be around if something comes up towards the end of the webinar to be able to ask questions as well. And feel free to connect with her in the chat box. I know she's ready. I heard her say, as early as next Friday that there's something going on that you can be involved with. So thank you so much, Jessica. That was really informative.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. We love partnering with ReCAST.
Thank you. And so, police legitimacy and violence prevention just in general, is very important. And, when we met with our community guiding board, it was definitely one of the topics that they said, we talking about this. We want to know what's going on in our region that we can be a part of. And so, sometimes we don't have to recreate the wheel. We can, like Jessica mentioned, amplify the voices and things that are already going on and bring our new and innovative ideas to really bring about that collective voice. And so, although we're talking about 3 different topics today, they really are all interwoven, right? And so, with violence prevention and everything definitely ties in, to a lot of things, mental health, everything. Jessica mentioned that they do work specifically around youth violence and other things of that nature. And so, I think it's a great segue. We are now going to hear from We Power, and we have Charlene Mack, and they are going to be sharing information about their organization and what they are doing as it relates to community organizing and efforts to early childhood education. So we know that that is a very big thing, and a lot has been going on in St. Louis specifically. And even if you aren't, because I noticed from the registration, even if you aren't local to St. Louis, a lot of this information still can be used, and the tools and the tips and things can be used wherever you are. And so definitely thank you, and welcome to those of you who are joining outside of St. Louis. And so we're going to hear from Charlene Mack, but also joining her, which is really cool, is that we also are going to hear from some community members that have been working alongside her and We Power over the years. They are going to speak to us about their involvement as parents and how they have really been a part of this movement, and really be able to speak and show you that, you don't have to have an official title. You don't have to, be on a big board or anything like that. Just you authentically being yourself and being a part of your community. You can be a change agent where you live, and together we can really make some things shake in our communities. And so next, I am going to hand things over to Charlene.
Thank you so much, Ebony. We're grateful and thankful to be on this call. And before I jump in with explaining more about who I am, and who we are. I just want to make it very clear. I work for the ladies on this call. I work for Cortega. I work for Dr. Jody. I work for Erica. I work for B. Marcel. And I just want to make that super clear. Now, before I jump in with explaining who I am, I want folks to put in the chat, what could you do with $23 million legally? I see you smiling, Ebony. What could you do with $23 million? Drop it in the chat. And I also see some folks on Facebook. Drop it in the chat. Let's get this thing moving. What could you do? I see you, Ebony. What could you do, Ebony? Oh, you can say it. You can say it aloud. Go for it.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was starting like a organization, like a mentoring program.
Okay. And Angelica, you mind if I pull your voice in? What could you do with $23 million?
That's fine, Charlene. I could do so much, but I can't just find one thing. Like when I think about the inequities within education, I'm thinking about something to what Ebony said, tutoring, education with math and reading and writing, homeless shelter, like just everything where there are gaps to help build equity within St. Louis.
Thank you so much for that, Angelica. I also pulled her in because she's a We Power change maker and just fantastic mother and advocate. So some other things I want to lift. I see Tamika said invest and donate to organizations such as this. Wilma said expand the services of fathers and families support center. Dr. Jody said provide resources and training for early childhood educators. Damon said overcome systemic racism through policy change. Tia said change. Ooh, y'all keep going. And Dr. A said on Facebook, he said, open an early childhood education center. Y'all keep this going. Now, would you believe me if I told you we secured that much money for early childhood education? And we're going to talk about that win in a little bit. Now, before we talk about the win, my name is Charlene Mack, and I have the privilege of serving as We Power's Vice President of Movement Building. And something we do is we define power as the ability to act. That's legit what I get to do every day, work alongside like wonderful change makers to build power. I work for them. Early on in the farm workers movement, they defined power as the ability to act, not the ability to act if you're white, not the ability to act if you speak well, not the ability to act if you have a degree, not an ability to act if you're of a certain faith. It's simply the ability to act. But how often do we forget that? Because society has told us the ability to act if you look a certain way, but that's not true. We Power, we ground change makers, we ground community in this definition. And honestly, some of them know it already. We don't do it in a dominant way. It's not one way. We don't believe power is zero sum. We don't tell community what to do. Instead, we do so in a relational way, which takes patient persistence. It's power with, it's increasing capacity, it's building and developing leaders. And that relational way, no, it's not a kumbaya. We disagree, but that's the beauty of democracy, and we create that space to harbor that power. Now, I have a bunch of ways on the screen that power has been realized over the last over the last 50 years or so. You see the farm workers movement in the lower left-hand corner, and Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. You see the Selma bus boycott. You see the East LA high school walkouts with the blowouts, etc. And the narrative and story I'll add in addition to this is the work that We Power has been doing in East St. Louis, and as well as St. Louis County, from education to community benefits agreements to economics. But our call today is going to be focused on the bold, fabulous, and fantastic leaders of the early childhood education work. So before they jump in with their presentation, I just want folks in the chat. I see Dr. A on Facebook. If you're a change maker, I just want to show you some love and send good vibes your way. I see Erica, Angelica, Lashana. We are grateful for you. Thank you for your work. Okay, so now I'm going to toss it over. We have B. Marcel, who's a nonprofit development consultant and a 2020 ECE Power Builder. We have Cortega Collins, who's the owner director of Good Shepherd Preschool and also a Power Builder. The lovely Alicia Lanier, who's the founder and ED of Urban Sprouts Child Development Center, and Dr. Jody Dr. Jody Jordan, St. Louis education advocate and also a power builder. So I talk quite a bit. Let's hear from the people that are leading this work, these beautiful Black women, if I can add that too. And I'm going to toss it over to Cortega, who's going to kick us off.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Charlene, for that information and for the introduction and for showing us examples of how our power has been executed to bring about change in our community. So we appreciate that. So we're talking about a victory for early childhood education, and a victory for ECE is also a victory for families and communities. So we celebrate this momentous achievement with those who helped make it possible. So how do we build the context for exercising power? We are a movement of change makers and entrepreneurs co-creating thriving communities. I like to refer to a visual as the circle of change, similar to the circle of life. We activate change makers, we build community wealth, we shape narratives, and we engage community, and we do it again, and we activate change makers, and we build community, we shape narratives, and we engage community. Here we have the three interconnected facets of change, how we activate change makers. We have the tomorrow builders, the power builders, and the Chisholm chair. So what's huge about this and so many others that effectively exacts change is that this is a collaborative work. It's a collaborative work. It's communal. Those who are directly impacted by unjust systems use their voice, their power to identify systems, use their voice and their power to identify systems, root causes of injustice, which enables them to create a new system that considers their unique needs. They are active participants in creating systems that directly impact them. The power builders, building people by whom change is made. The success of the Prop R is a manifestation of this process. The city alderman unanimously voted to put Prop R on the ballot, which doesn't happen very often. And then the Chisholm chair, power at tables. These fellows are poised to enhance their power through elected office. So next, I'm going to pass it over to B. Marcel, who will offer more information on the three facets of change.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cortega. Again, I am B. Marcel Williams, and I am a power builder. I was a part of the Early Childhood Education Power Building Academy. So our Tomorrow Builder Fellows, they were a part of We Power from 2019 to 2021. They really helped lay the foundation of what the work that we actually got to engage in and everything that we got to do. The impact towards early childhood education. So there were many different ways and multiple steps over the last couple of years that had to take place in order to have the success of winning the Prop R campaign, securing the $23 million that Charlene spoke about. It started in March 2019 with Tomorrow Builders Fellowship launching, and then they had to, as Jessica spoke earlier, in regards to community outreach, community impact, community engagement. That's really where our work was focused on. Over 1,000 plus Dream of Change surveys were collected. We engaged over 2,000 people. We had to reimagine and think through, what could this really look like? What change could we truly make here in the St. Louis area for early childhood education, and what are the key areas that we want to partake in. So the playbook to reimagine all of this, St. Louis early childhood education, it was supported by over 100 plus people and organizations. And during COVID-19, ECE Demands campaign secured $7.5 million in federal CARES Act funds, 55,000 plus phone calls, door knocks, and text messages were sent out and done live in person. Prop R campaign, again, as we mentioned before, that $23 million was secured for early childhood education. And now where are we? We are moving towards more teaching. So Prop R teaching to ensure that community members and key stakeholders are engaged and informed about the work that we are doing. Some key partners that we had, only to name a few, are SCIP, Clark Fox, Policy Institute, Urban Sprouts, of course, We Power, Southside, and that's only to name a few. We had so many volunteers that were a part of this, and thank you so much to everyone that supported, that volunteered, that shared on social media, that helped with the phone banking, all of that. And because of these efforts, St. Louis, we got an overwhelmingly yes to Prop R. So that's yes to our future, yes to the future of St. Louis and the education of early childhood scholars that are infants and toddlers. So the programming, I cannot wait to see what the difference that we made and how it's going to affect the lives of our youth.
So I am Jody Jordan. Okay, I want to make sure I'm heard. Okay, I'm Jody Jordan, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the work that we did collectively to build our work around early childhood education and to secure the votes that we secured in order to get this $23 million to go toward early childhood education. And it started with a lot of us coming together as a group and really taking it upon ourselves to go into the community and inform, to talk. And so we used phone banking. We called the community members, we called educators, and we talked to them, and we talked about the need for them to support this important measure to vote. And so phone banking was a great part of our consensus building and building relationships across the city in order to get that initial support for Prop R. Then we also worked to get endorsements from others across the city. We had over 50 plus high profile endorsements. And those endorsements, as you can see, came from people like Corey Bush. We had other aldermen. We had the news media. We had state representatives, other not-for-profit agencies, and local early childhood providers who really got on board with us and understood the importance of casting the vote, but even more than that, sharing that information with others so that we could get the support we needed to win this important legislation. Another piece of our work was just direct mailers. We sent out over 41,000 pieces of information into the community. And you could see them in yard signs, you could see the mailers where we were just trying to get the word out so that people who didn't know would understand how important this vote was, and they would have the necessary information to follow and support us. Overall, 154,000 campaign funds were raised for the project. But one of the big things we had was that we had over 1 million digital impressions. And people like me, we got to tell our story. We got to talk about our passion about early childhood. We got to share how important the work of early childhood is for the children, as well as for those providers who every day are working with children, and how important it is to lift the work of early childhood. If nothing else, COVID-19 has shown the need for early childhood, and this campaign was actually instrumental in getting money and funding that will change the face of early childhood in the city. Overwhelmingly, 71,532, that's 56% of voters said yes for Prop R. That means that $2.3 million will go to St. Louis children, families, and early childhood professionals every year. And that's a great win for all of us.
So exciting to have been a part of this journey, and we are grateful for all that have joined us along this path. We called out a number of 2,000 plus folks that have been involved in helping to shape this system. But again, we could not have done it without all the voters, all the change makers, the Tomorrow Fellows, our neighbors, and our community at large. So what's next? What's next is we are headed towards change. We went through all of this policy making and community engagement to lead us to the playbook. And we've developed a playbook to help us to guide the work that is necessary for the children in our region. So we are developing a regional early childhood coordinating nonprofit. I happen to be one of the vice chairs of that entity, joined with Rose Anderson Rice and Dr. Albert Sanders. We have just brought on a steering committee of community stakeholders, parents, and educators to help us to make decisions on behalf of the children in our region. In that regional coordinating entity, we are making sure that we are staying close to things like Prop R and ensuring that everyone has an opportunity uh, to be a part of the advisory committee, the community review boards, and really connecting early childhood providers, parents, and stakeholders to as many tables as we can that impact children in the way that they live. We are so excited about the forward momentum here in St. Louis. This is the first time that we've had public dollars that are strategically designated. And we actually were able to put those in with your help for children. And we are not finished. We want to make sure that this happens in the county as well. So we are putting together a funding and access coalition that will meet and work towards how we can make this similar public funding stream available for children and families in the county as well.
There's not much to say after the dopeness of the, again, I can't thank Dr. Jody, Cortega, B. Marcel, and Alicia enough. And just a moment of silence for the dope Black women that are leading this work. And like Alicia said, over 2,000 people activated, not just at the table, but lead it. And so that's it. I have a little bit of contact information here if you want to reach out to us and get involved. And my extended and there's an immense amount of gratitude and thankfulness for the dope leadership that's in this city. Thank you all.
Yes, that was a lot of, I see the chat box and everybody is saying fantastic work, ladies. Great job, ladies. Great job, everyone who was a part of this. That was absolutely fantastic and, inspiring to see, the actual change and things that came about, tying all those pieces in together because, last week we really dove really deep into participatory budgeting and what that is. And so I loved, another piece of that, of really seeing, what participatory budgeting can look like, even on a legislative level, and how important, democracy and civic engagement is to really bring about systematic changes. And so it's actually a, little teaser. Next week, the end of the webinar will be wrapping up with a discussion about engaging your elected officials and after the vote. So you all are already even seeing, how, partnering with and really staying on top of elected officials can bring about change, just like these wonderful dope ladies just told us about. And so Charlene, and also, for Cortega, Jody, Alicia, B. Marcel, whoever wants to answer, I do have a question for you all. And so, I know that there's a lot of parents on the call, and they may be wondering, I know that you all mentioned that, there's a group that's starting up, fairly recently to talk about this work in the county. And so, like, what if someone's wondering, like, I love this. I love everything they just said. I'm passionate about, education here. What are some like action steps that you think parents could take like right now?
I'm gonna pull in one of my leaders first to see if they want to answer.
Are we talking about for county or just parents as a whole?
We could talk about for parents as a whole, and then specifically county to shed a little insight on that.
Yeah, so just to kind of take us back about a year or so before we got to Prop R, we aggressively went after dollars in the county, and we did not lose that fight, right? We slowed that fight down, and we are still encouraged by what is possible. So I encourage you to follow WePower's work, to go to, and I can drop it in the chat after I'm done talking, to go to the Regional Early Childhood Entities website and follow that work there, because that entity is really going to be driving some of the conversations um, regarding child well-being around St. Louis. So we're just a connector. We're not going to be the sole decision-making table, but we will be connecting a lot of the work that's happening there and giving parents opportunities to better see where they can sit at decision-making tables. Because I think a part of what we have thought in the past is that I don't belong here. I kind of just have to follow the work, but we can actually be the work, right? And we can create the St. Louis that we want our children to grow up in.
Thank you for that. I saw someone in the chat was like, county, please.
Yeah.
Yes, and we know the county needs a lot of investment. There are more early childhood providers in St. Louis County than there are cities. This was a ripe and ready time. We are so grateful for MHB for sort of having, some of that readiness, right? My mom used to always say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So when things started turning in the county, MHB was like, hey, we have these funds that we can put towards early childhood, and we just need more ripe and ready opportunities like that in the county. And to continue the conversations, we are starting this funding and access coalition. So anyone here that is interested in how they can be a change maker, you don't have to wait for the title. Contact Charlene. She will get you involved. And then that way you will make sure that you are, even as a parent, getting in some of these power building academies, which we will be hosting in I think it's June or July. And there will be some community stakeholder committees on the Funding and Access Coalition, so that folks can be involved and help us to go after those big wins for the county.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. I have one more thing. Call your county councilwoman and tell them that early child, or woman or man, but we're talking about North County, so that's what I said. And tell them that early childhood is a priority. One of the things that we heard during the pandemic from our county council folks was like, hey, we don't hear that much from people around this issue. So we need you all to kind of lift it up and let them know that it is a priority. They need to hear from us often. They need to know that that should be something that is at the top of their list. And the way to do that is that we lean in on them and keep them connected to the children that are coming into the world, because we know we can't wait till they get to elementary school, right? We know that humans are important from the time of conception, and that we have to start working on their behalf long before they enter the world.
Yes, thank you for that. You actually answered what my next question was going to be. I was going to ask, for parents or just community members in general, that because they schedule, they like, I don't know if I could commit to being on a committee or something, like what can I do? And you hit it right on the head that, they could, contact their elected officials and council members and alder people about, letting them know that this is a topic that is important to them, so that they can get that message and know that it's something that is on our radar. And so I saw some different questions kind of popping up in the chat box about, so that sounds great, but how do I even figure out who my elected officials are and how to reach them and contact them? And so you can go to, for the county council specifically, you can go to the county website, and then they will have information on Damon, our director. He dropped the link into the chat box, and then you'll be able to see who your officials are based off, where you live, who they are. And then also too, great segue, next week, we actually are going to be having a webinar all about engaging your elected officials. And part of that conversation is about actually figuring out who represents me, and on those different hierarchies of elected officials, when to contact who and to contact who about what. And so, next week when it comes right up, you can even remember that, hey, Alicia and We Power told us last week, early childhood education is something that we are passionate about. And so thank you all so much. As the questions come in towards the end of the event, we will open it back up. And so if you have questions, just the same, like for Jessica, We Power and the community members are going to be here for you to ask them questions as well. So thank you so much. That was really great. I'm still thinking about what I could do with $23 million. And so, chats and in the chat box and in the comment section, things are being added, different links on how you can get into contact with We Power, with the St. Louis Area Violence Prevention Commission. Ms. Paula just shared a link about tips and things, a toolkit that you can use about organizing community members where you live, because, we all have our passions and, like the ladies just mentioned, we can all start somewhere, right? All of our voices are important and valuable in our community. And when we come together, we can really make things happen, because, the decisions don't have to be made for us. We can make the decisions. We live in the community. We know what's going on. We know what will work. And, our ideas are magnificent. Our ways to go about engaging our communities are magnificent. And so you definitely hold that power. And just imagine when y'all come together, what can happen. You could have a whole proposition get passed. You can, a lot of changes can be made, tangible changes, and really start to shift systems. And so that is really, really, really amazing. And so, as you've kind of seen, there's different people and entities that you can partner with to go about making change in your community. And one of those actually, which, really holds a really influential role, especially in the Black community, are our faith-based organizations. And so, we definitely want to talk about, how can we partner with our faith-based organizations? What does that look like? And so next we are going to hear from Ms. Lisa Potts. She is a neighborhood leadership fellow. She is a previous ReCAST delegate. You heard Jessica say that she's a part of the Violence Prevention Commission. She's also with MHB. And so, she's just looped into everything that we've been talking about this afternoon. And so she's going to share with us about her experiences and things that you need to know when it comes to partnering with faith-based organizations. And so with that, Lisa, I am going to hand it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Ebony, thank you so much for the invitation today. You said, you took the words right out of my mouth. I know at first I was thinking, well, how is this all connected besides, the whole emphasis around change? But, you're right. I do work for the St. Louis Mental Health Board. I am a project director for mental health services. And I was actually a part of that process for helping with Prop R. I secured letters of support from my elected official personally, and we actually asked her, Alderwoman Shamim Hubbard, to be the lead alderperson on this particular effort. And now that that is actually passed, our organization is also going to be hosting those funds. So we will be putting those funds back out into the community in the form of grants to nonprofit organizations. I'm actually on an interview panel for interviewing staff for that. So I'm really excited about that. And it's a really exciting time, for this community. I also work with Jessica on with the Violence Prevention Commission, and I also coordinate a couple of the workshops, the committee. So if you're interested in youth safe spaces for young people or community engagement, I'm coordinating those particular committees. So definitely, show up hopefully next Friday to the quarterly meeting, where you can kind of get a whole well-rounded view of everything that's happening around the violence prevention piece. So I am a neighborhood leadership fellow. I'm in neighborhood leadership fellows now, but I'm also a neighborhood leadership academy graduate. And so that's why one of the reasons I was asked to be here. my work around organizing pastors was really it just kind of happened. And it's really, again, just about change making and what do you need to do in the community to make things happen? And who are your influencers? We know, especially in the Black community, that our faith-based organizations, is where the information happens, where information gets shared. And so my journey with this group started back in 2013. I was working for People's Community Action Corporation, and my position was I was the coordinator for the St. Louis Regional Unbanked Task Force. In 2010, St. Louis was #1 for having the most unbanked African Americans in the country. We're always known for something terrible. And we were like, what? I didn't even know what that was. I was like, what is an unbanked person? Like, what does that even mean? I didn't even know how serious of an issue that was. And basically, it just meant that a person does not have a bank account. They live their lives daily, through a cash system, and pay their loans and check cashing places and things of that nature. And at that time in 2010, 31% of African Americans in St. Louis were unbanked. So we were #1 in the country. And so what we started doing is we formed a coalition. We formed a coalition of nonprofit partners, bank partners, federal agencies, as well as some churches, to basically look at the problem. Like, what is this problem of being unbanked and how do we address it? And so we started thinking about, how do we reach people? Like, where are they? So we started being really creative. Maybe we should go to the barbershop. Maybe we should go to the grocery store. And then it was like, why not churches? Why not go to our pastors and talk to congregations? And it's not really easy getting into a church. They're not as trusting automatically, just because they have so many people coming at them. So you really have to do some legwork in getting in front of a church to get the information across that you need. But once you do that, they are very welcoming and will help you at any turn. And the key is finding things that are common. So what are the emerging issues that are happening in the community? At that time, we were trying to get people educated around being banked and trying to keep people away from predatory lending services. So how did that translate to going into a church? Let's meet people where they are. And let's just be honest, what happens in church that's very important, for that day? The collection plates gets passed, right? So if you can't budget and you can't pay your rent and can't figure out how to pay your utilities, the last place that gets paid is, the collection plate at church. So they actually had a reason for wanting us to help people get their financial lives in order, because you figure if you can figure out how to budget and pay all your bills and have discretionary income, you should be including the church as one of your bills, so that you can help, further the programs that they care about as well. And so that was kind of our initial approach. And we started asking questions. You also have to just ask them, what is it that you need and how can we help you? Pastors are similar to teachers in a sense that they find themselves wearing multiple hats. When you show up on Sunday, they have to be the pastor, they have to be the teacher, they have to be the lawyer. They have to listen. And so you have to understand what you're looking for so that they can know how to help you. And one of the things that we found out from them was that while it was great for us to try to tell them how to help people budget and how to help people improve their credit, they too needed that information. So they wanted us to arm them with that information so that they could help us be the teachers. So it was like teaching them how to do it so that they could then help teach other people. And so we started going in, making presentations and announcements in church. If you've been to some of the churches, there's a time when you get to, special guests get to come up to the microphone and make announcements. So you can do things like that. You can put information into their church bulletins. But the thing is, you have to show up, and it's about building relationships. That's where it starts. There's also this thing about food. I saw in the chat, meet people where they are. We found out that pastors were having these regular breakfasts where they were just, solving the world's problems. And so we figured out how to get invited to a breakfast, just by connecting to another pastor, and got invited to the breakfast and was put on the agenda. And once we were a part of that, then you get an opportunity to meet multiple players and find out who's doing what. And it's just not about one church. The key is finding somebody in that church, to your point that you used earlier, a change maker. There are change makers in every institution. Finding that individual who's the communicator and who, almost like the secretary of an organization, that secretary knows all the business, they know everything that's happening. So getting to that person that is the sharer of information and find out how they go about disseminating their information. Do they have newsletters? And in today's world, are they on social media? Are they on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever that may be? And finding out how they share that information and getting them information so that they can share it with their parishioners. Because one thing churches is there are resources. They can't be a resource if they don't have the information to share. So they welcome any type of information that you can share with them that they can turn around and share with their parishioners as well. We did the pastors' breakfasts for about 5 years, and every year we tried to do it bigger and better by, again, asking them what they needed, how could we provide assistance, and how could we help them. And then we started empowering them by doing trainers with pastors themselves. They allowed us to start coming into the churches. We had a couple of churches that said, hey, we have some extra space here. We have computers. Can we set up a computer lab where people can come in and, access their banking accounts, because if they don't have, internet access at home, they maybe can come in and access it, through our church. And so we started doing things like that. And so people started figuring out how they could get involved and how they could grow and be a part of the solution instead of being considered part of the problem by not just having the information and knowing what was going on. So that was one example. A more recent example that I've been involved in with engaging churches actually happened because of this pandemic. At MHB, I manage a lot of contracts. And so one of the programs in my portfolio is Bridges to Care and Recovery through the Health Network. And they have a program where they train, again, change makers, in the church to be wellness champions. And these wellness champions are trained in mental health services and how to talk to people about mental health. Because another thing that's a stigma in the Black community is we don't access mental health. Jessica mentioned that earlier, that we now have a new system in place where you can call 211 and you can get directly connected to mental health services. But we have to first start talking about it. We have to acknowledge that it's okay for us to ask for help, that it's okay that we need help. And that's still a big problem and a big stigma in our community. And since this pandemic, I can honestly say that I have seen a lot more people on TV, your actors and actresses and, singers and, public figures, stepping out and sharing their voice and saying, hey, I needed some help, or I had some mental health issues, and this is how you can get help. There are mental health apps out here now, but we have to start talking about it so that it's no longer a stigma to ask for the help that we need. So these wellness champions are actually trained by Behavioral Health Network, and this is done in the city and the county. So any church that's interested in being trained as a mental health awareness partner, I will put that information in the chat so you can reach out to Bridges Care and Recovery. It is a fantastic organization. But this was right around the time when the pandemic had really just hit, and everybody was fearful about people going to church on Easter. So it's been a year since this actually took place. And so we kind of got together, and so I said, listen, we started meeting with doctors, Dr. Kanika Turner, Dr. Punch, and others who were very knowledgeable about, at the time, we were just still trying to figure out the proper way to put a mask on, right? This was really early this was like March of 2020. How do we put on a mask? We were still talking about, should we wear gloves or should we not wear gloves? You know, the type of sanitizer you should use. So all those things. And then we started thinking, well, churches should not be having service on Easter. And it's like, are you going to tell some Black people that they can't go to church on Easter? And so that became an issue. And so we started coming together and trying to, you know, putting messages together so that we can keep people safe. And we put on a series of webinars for the faith-based community to empower them with knowledge and information, not only so that they can keep themselves safe, but so that they can keep their community safe, their congregants safe, and educate the community. We had signed, we partnered with Prepare STL, who had the On the Ground campaign, going door to door, going to businesses, going to your gas stations, and going to churches and putting signs out and telling people, for one, stay at home. But if you do come out, you know, stay 6 feet apart, wear your mask, you know, hand sanitizer, etc. So again, it's about communicating and finding an issue that is relevant or emerging. You know, this issue around, you know, violence prevention and children being exposed to violence, that is absolutely getting ready to be my next, you know, issue that I take up, you know, with a group of pastors, because it is time that we once again band together and bring more community voices to the table. And how do we address this issue around violence prevention, especially as children are being exposed? So the key is, you know, communication. And it doesn't matter what faith you're with. I happen to not be a member of any particular church. And this gave me the opportunity to visit several churches and meet several pastors from all walks of all faiths. And they were all welcoming, but looking at issues that are emerging and finding what that common ground is, finding what that common interest is, and bringing that to their attention and to the table. And then use your network. You know, this is a room full of change makers and room full of people who are powerful and know people and know friends. Even if it's your Facebook network, start asking your friends, hey, what church do you go to? You know, can you get me an audience with the secretary? Can you get me an audience with your pastor? What types of programs do you have? How can I come in and be a guest speaker? And, or I have this flyer, can you share this, you know, with your congregation? And start there. And once you get in and somebody takes an interest in what you're working on, you'll get to the right people. And just with the, you know, one church that we work with, he's connected to 140 churches. So you get with the person who has the connection, and that you just, by connecting with the right person, you can spread your message and connect to, you know, the people who really are making things happen, you know, at the church, with our faith leaders, and that can then affect change across this community.
Wow, thank you, Lisa. I know if we were if we were somewhere, then I'd be like, okay, everybody clap, yes. Because that really tied in. I see, oh, okay, I see everybody clapping. And that really ties in, you know, a lot of what, you know, we've talked about this afternoon. And I really enjoyed how, you know, with working with the faith-based organizations, you know, it could be around topics like early childhood education. It could be around topics like, you know, violence prevention and all these different things. It can still be, you know, the message can be sent through this implemental and foundational piece of many of communities of color. And so, you know, you did kind of touch on one of my questions. And so I was gonna kind of ask you to expand on it a little bit before we open it up to questions from everyone. You mentioned how you weren't necessarily a member of a particular church. And so I know for some people that may be intimidating to, you know, approach maybe a church or something that maybe, you know, they live in that community, they know it's there, but they've never, you know, been before, or just overcoming that and figuring out, you know, who is the person that I should reach out to within this church. And so could you share kind of a little information, like maybe what would be like that very first thing that somebody could do?
Yeah, again, use your networks, use your friends, your family and things of that nature. You know, you could always, everybody is not an extrovert, everybody's not comfortable going into new places, but you could always just simply go to the church. It's, go to the service. And that's what I used to do, because since I didn't belong to a particular church, I used it as an adventure. And I went to different churches and, got to know, and it's always an opportunity. They always want you to stand up when you new, right? So you get an opportunity to introduce yourself. But if you have like flyers and information, use that as an opportunity to just pass out your information. People are so welcoming. People are always so anxious for great information to share with others. So if you show up, with that spirit of you're trying to provide a service that can be of support and help to a community and to a wider audience, you will definitely be welcomed with open arms. But show up with some information to share, and they will be happy to, bring you in. And then the only problem you'll have is 10 different people calling you trying to say which church are you joining. You're on mute, Ebony.
Of course. I was just thinking about, we almost made it through the whole thing without nobody being muted while speaking, and it was me. And so I was just thinking about the acknowledgement of the visitors and that opportunity that you have. And so you are correct. That was really, really, really powerful. I saw the chat box lighting up and things. And so now, that we have had the opportunity to hear from all of our different panelists. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, the whole dope crew from We Power. Thank you, Lisa. I also want to now open it up if there are any questions or any comments or anything from our audience. Ms. Paula, have you seen anything in the chat box? I see standing ovations are happening in the chat box. Did anyone have any questions? Also, too, if you're on Facebook, we're checking there as well. And so as people, I see that our different speakers, they have put their contact information and things into the chat box. I had a question for whoever wants to take it. It came up a little bit while we were speaking, but I know one thing, with community organizing and things, there has been, during a pandemic, I imagine, has made that more challenging than maybe it had been in the past as far as connecting with people. And so when we kind of think about the digital divide, I'm gonna throw that out there. What are some ways, while you guys have been doing this organizing, that you've kind of addressed being able to still keep community engaged, even with the digital divide and also maybe not being able to meet in person? And I'll throw that to maybe, since she spoke earlier on, how about I'll throw that to Jessica.
So I will say we don't have that cracked yet, right? We're still having virtual meetings. One of the things that we have done in the absence of being able to canvas and do things like we used to is we did different workshops for community residents with the MU extension. So things like how do you host effective meetings, build consensus, create an action plan. And so our goal now, and we're in the process of creating documents that we can distribute, like infographics that get that same information out there, but in a form that doesn't require us to be face-to-face in a room having a workshop. We're also looking at videos. Those obviously fall under the kind of digital divide thing. and the very real difficulty that we saw when we were doing a youth empowerment program, and when the youth had to give back their hotspots and their laptops at the end of school last year, that there was a drop off in participation. So we've turned some of our things into distributable materials, but some of our community engagement has definitely had to switch because of the pandemic. And it's something that we're in the process of pivoting on, but long-term, we're going to have to figure out an even stronger strategy. And I think I saw that Charlene unmuted herself, so I bet that she has something to add here.
Yeah, I don't mind. And I appreciate that. Instead of a cold call, a warm call, Jessica. That speaks to the teacher inside of me. So, and I think Lisa may appreciate this. There's something that we call the most revolutionary tool in community organizing, and that's called the one-to-one. And yes, we may not be able to meet face to face, but you can still do them in Zoom. I had moved to St. Louis last year from Charlotte, North Carolina. And what was really important to me was making sure that I didn't come in with assumptions, and I didn't tell anyone what they needed to do. And like Lisa said, like just listen. In my first 90 days, so I moved here 2-3 weeks before the pandemic, but my first 90 days, I had over 200 one-to-ones on Zoom with change makers. And then a couple months in, we launched 169 person change maker program. And folks like Angelica, Lashana, like we at Cortega, Alicia, like our and Marcel, they also have one-to-ones. So we really work to not just have the relationship, but cultivate the relationship and also cultivate leadership. So yeah, I can't, Lisa said it best earlier, like have those one-to-ones and don't leave people there, invite them in and cultivate leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. I see. Yes, yes. I saw some people said that they are new to St. Louis and now they are super ecstatic to get connected with some of the different initiatives that are going on in our region. So I am super excited about that. And so, yes, are there any other questions or comments or anything that have came in, Ms. Paula?
There is nothing on Facebook that I've seen. Oh, there is a question right now for Lisa. What's one thing that gets in the way of relationship building? How can we as a community improve here?
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
What's one thing that gets in the way of relationship building? How can we as a community improve here?
Man, you have to navigate, you have to be humble, and you have to navigate people's egos. I hate to say that, but it really is true. You have to approach things as if you have like the best kept secret and you just want to share it. You know what I mean? It does, and not make it about you, and make it about the community or whatever the issue is, because it's never about me, you know. But what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And so if you see somebody else that's really eager, you know how you go to a meeting sometime and somebody seems like they really want to be in charge, but it's really your meeting. Look, step back, let them lead, because it's hard enough finding people who will step up and take the lead on something. Give people the chance to step up when they want to step up and just move out the way. And that's hard for some people to do, especially if it's your agenda. It's your table, right? You set the table and somebody else comes in like they want to take over. Hey, step back and share and scoot over and be like, come sit right next to me and let them do it. Because, and it's hard for me as a person to let things go, because you know how you know how you want it done, and you know how it will be done if you do it. And if you give it to somebody else, it doesn't get done, it's still gonna fall on you. So it's a delicate balance. But when people act like they want to, you know, raise their hand to do something, delegate, give it to them, and let them go with it. You have to remove your ego and take the I out of the equation, because ultimately it's about we.
Wow, thank you. I think that was a great way to sum it up. And so thank you so much, ladies. Also, too, they aren't on the screen here, but I definitely have to shout out again. Thank you so much to Cortega and Dr. Jody and Alicia and Marcel that joined from We Power to talk about their efforts with early childhood education. And so as we come to an end, at least the end for this afternoon, I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. We talked about, collective voice and a lot of things. And it's really, 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 powerful what happens when we come together, when we remove our egos, when we work alongside one of each other, when we bring our innovative ideas together, because you never know, you may be sitting there thinking, I'm sure somebody has thought of this. And maybe they have not, or they've thought about it, but they haven't brought it out to be spoken for everybody to come in and collaborate on it. So, in the chat box, we've shared resources on how to connect with everyone and every organization that you've heard from today. If you're watching live or you're watching the replay, we're so that you were here. And next week, we are going to continue this conversation with the last webinar in our Amplify Your Voice series, which is about after the vote, engaging your elected official, which came up a lot within today's topic, because they're all are connected and they're all are ways that we can work together to really amplify community voice. So spread the word, and I hope to see you all right back here, same link, same time, 2 p.m. We have elected officials, we have former state reps, we have local county council members, we have alder people from St. Louis City. So we have representation across the board, different experience, whether they've been an elected official for years now, or they actually are just getting started and just made that transition from just a community member, and now they are representing someone's voice now as an elected official, to really talk about that conversation and how we can work with elected officials, whether we are eligible to vote or not. There's something to be done in ways that we can collaborate. And so thank you, everyone. I will be sending out the replay. And so this was recorded. I'm going to stop recording and I'm going to stop the Facebook Live. But remember that you are a change maker. You are powerful and you make a difference in your community. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.